Leadership 2022. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. Good to have you with us. In this day and age, leadership can be a challenge for a lot of different people, and it's a good thing in a way because there's so many organizations and groups and teams that are more diverse than ever. But there's a terrific update to a book that helps everybody who is part of this equation. It's by Jennifer Brown. She's a speaker and a best-selling author. She joins us now, and the book is How to Be an Inclusive Leader: Your Role in Creating Cultures of Belonging where everyone can thrive. Jennifer, thanks for joining us. This is actually an update to a book that first came out 4 years ago. Tell me about the original and the changes that you put into it.
Thanks, David. And yes, I needed to update the book. So what a different world it was then. And we knew so much less. And I think fewer people were motivated to take on this topic. And now the question is how? Like, it's not the why, but the how. How can I investigate myself, my role in change, the ecosystems around me, the flaws in the system in which perhaps I benefit or don't, depending on which system we're talking about and depending on how we identify. So, the want and the desire and the motivation is so different now. And yet the struggles are still very much coming down to, I think, tactical considerations. Like, how do I really do this? What does that look like? What does it sound like? And how do I, as a person of both marginalized identities and privileged identities, perhaps in my case, sort of activate both of those things so that I can be a part of positive change?
Is it also because, society has changed so much? There used to be a time when we all felt like, okay, leaders were the strict disciplinarians who essentially got the most out of you through fear, right? We've all had those memories of bosses, all of us of a certain age going back 30 or 40 years. But society has progressed a lot. And I would imagine for a lot of people who still want that incredible productivity, you want your team to do the best. It's not a matter now of just threatening them.
No, you cannot lead through that way. The ability to thrive in a system that wasn't built by and for you, is a special skill. And we need leaders who can change that system so that the thriving is possible. And so, excuse me, that we need to create a different experience for people where they feel psychologically safe, where they feel seen and heard, where they feel like they're a critical part of whatever product is being built, whatever effort is being undertaken. And unfortunately, the system has been toxic to so many of us because we weren't at the table when it was built. So really the work ahead for leaders is to shift the way they lead personally and shift their organizations to respond to and anticipate the way that the workforce is changing and the way that the world is changing around them.
And is that a phenomena, sort of a cultural phenomena change in that I think more and more people, it seems like, feel like they want to have ownership over what they're doing. And as a result, they want to be listened to, they want their ideas respected. And once you sort of open that door, sure, maybe they're more productive, but there's a flip side to that as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of openness now and transparency, and that can be difficult. Certainly the accountability of working for a company with whom your values do not align. That is going to be a big problem. It is already a big problem, particularly for the younger generations that really want to see themselves and what they believe in from a progressive values perspective reflected in the institutions that they work with. They want that pride. They want that sense of purpose. They want to feel that they have a seat at that table. And we want them to feel that way because we need the innovation that is coming from these generations. This is not an optional thing. And we need the innovation, not just for workplace cultures, but we need it to build better products, services, whatever we build for the world in order that it resonates, right? And so this is a very bottom line concept, as well as a moral one, which, I often wish the moral one were enough. But if it's not, there's plenty of other ways to look at it and convince yourselves and others that this is a worthy endeavor.
When you look out across the horizon and see companies that are doing it well and companies or organizations that are doing it poorly, give us some examples of both.
Yeah, I think, we had a big lesson in what's called performative allyship, over the course of the last couple of years, where companies were checking a box. They put the black square up, right, in June of 2020. Remember, a lot of companies who could not walk the talk. And as soon as people started to scrutinize, for instance, the demographics of their board, for example, versus the messages that they were sending out, there was an inconsistency. And so, and there's now a new accountability, I think, for looking up and down and around to understand all the pieces of the ecosystem. Are they all aligned? And so, yes, I mean, it's been really intense, but the accountability is the piece that is pushing institutions to take a hard look and to kind of clean house. And this is not work that is just for now. This is literally equipping companies and leaders to flourish in the future. So I think of what's happening now as, so what are we going to do with the lessons and everything that we learned and were challenged by the last couple of years? It was hard. It's for companies though that make a misstep, it's going to be very pricey, very costly. If that keeps happening, it could cost you, your viability going forward into the future.
How difficult has it been, and how much have we learned because of COVID and with so many people, so many teams being separated physically from each other and having to sort of interact and work together, simply collaborate through Zoom? That's a whole different set of challenges in terms of both accountability, trying to keep people motivated, trying to keep people together, working as a team.
Yeah, it's been kind of both sides. I think the workplace was toxic for many of us who didn't fit there. And so I think that coming into a physical workplace, I think was problematic for performance and for belonging. So for some of us that, for example, needed an accommodation, have a disability, working from our home environment is where we do our best work, for example. And for some of us, Black women, for example, 3%, I think, want to go back to a physical workplace, 3%. So we're talking about something to be avoided. And that needs to improve and needs to change in order to feel like it's a welcoming, comfortable place. And that's critical for productivity and engagement. But on the flip side, I worry and have worried that, certainly talent that is not traditionally seen and valued in the old world is very much virtually sort of out of sight, out of mind. And I'm concerned that there is a lot of churn amongst the kinds of talent that have been missing from our workforces, in a virtual way. And a lot of leaders and managers that don't know how to lead and manage virtually inclusively. I think that's a whole different level of skill. It's harder. We've got to be more diligent. We've got to be more vigilant. And we have to be checking in management by walking around, management by zooming around, touching base, checking in. You've got to somehow, reach people and understand what's getting in the way for them to thrive. And you've got to do that with your hands tied behind your back, over these, this virtual setting. And it's hard, but I think it's the ultimate test of an inclusive leader. Can you do this virtually? And can you do it well without a lot of the cues that we get from being physically co-located with each other? But I am worried because I think that, the people who are the loudest, the best at self-promotion, those who don't have a lot of bias happening to them every day, they might show up better in this virtual world. And that's not, that's something we've got to be extra careful about, that we don't actually lose generations of talent because we are virtualized.
And for people who are more introverted, who are more soft-spoken, who may be of color or minority or disability, what's a good strategy? Are there a set of good strategies you found for leaders who want to be able to inspire and help those people who might feel marginalized get the most out of their productivity?
Yeah, I mean, I think leaders in many cases are the most uncomfortable with speaking about DEI. And I think people get stuck with, how do I start? What do I say? I don't want to tokenize anyone. I have a lot of privilege. What do I talk about? My advice is just to get started, just to begin to speak about what's uncomfortable, what you're learning, what you're not getting right, perhaps, what your intention is. Where you are as a learner. And my book is really wonderful with that, because you can literally open it up to any page and it's welcoming, it's inviting, it's not shaming. It is literally techniques and wording and language and ways to broach and cross difference. And I think once you start to do that and indicate that you are walking the talk, that you're practicing the skill of inclusive leadership, and that you're human and absolutely fallible, and that you're humble to leading in a different way, I think people will follow, and we can build that trust so that we can then be heard differently. And I mean, I would love to work for a person that did that well. I seldom have. That's probably why I'm an entrepreneur. But that's the kind of culture I want to set.
Is there a certain amount of slack that leaders can expect to receive if, in fact, they show, okay, I'm a middle-aged white male, I have a very different set of background and experiences than, say, somebody who's an African American who grew up, underprivileged, or somebody who's got disabilities, or a woman, or LGBTQ. But by recognizing that off the top and saying, I get that there are differences in our backgrounds, but here's what I'm going to try to do. Is there some forgiveness, therefore? Is there some slack that is given for somebody who may not get the language exactly right?
I mean, I want there to be. I really deeply think, and we need to remind ourselves whenever we feel high and mighty about what we know and whatever, like there's not a single one among us that has known all the language, all the things to say, has always gotten it right. So, we have to hold space and grace for learning all around us and within ourselves, and I think that if we come from that place, then we can find the teachable moments to call someone in and say, hey, I just want to give you some feedback on some language, here's what we say, or here's what's said, or here's what we, don't say, or, I don't see color as a classic example. A lot of leaders of my generation were told this is the right thing to say. But really, color and difference in general wants to be seen. I mean, we want to be seen and heard, and we don't want it swept under the rug. And so, what a wonderful thing to start by sharing your pronouns, perhaps, or saying, there are certain things I've been learning that now I'm revisiting. And I think if we open it up that way, it's with humility, it's with openness, it's with teachability. But we all have to participate in creating the learning environment as one where there's an invitation to change and an opportunity to change without being shamed, because it's very difficult to learn from a place of shame.
The book is How to Be an Inclusive Leader, Your Role in Creating Cultures of Belonging Where Everyone Can Thrive. The author is Jennifer Brown. She's a speaker, best-selling author. And again, an update on a book that just came out 4 years ago with some new stuff post-COVID. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us on the conversation. We appreciate it. And congratulations on the book.
Thanks so much, David.
You're welcome.